Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Hope y'all are warm enough. It was a little chilly this morning when it got out, but it is a beautiful sunny day. So today's format's going to be just like last time's. I guess that was 2 weeks ago now. We're going to say the prayer, we're going to watch a video, and then we're going to have a discussion. And do we have any prayer requests that y'all have? Yes, Joe.
Mary Turner was talking to me about a lady, and her last name was Dow, D-O-W, and they just identified here recently and last Thursday, and sometime she was out chasing her dog and had a heart attack and died.
Mm.
And that's all I heard from Gary. Her name's Amanda Dow.
Okay.
They place music like paperwork before tomorrow.
Okay. Well, let's go to God in prayer. Lord, thank you for the opportunity we have to stand before you, to petition you, to praise you, and just to be in your presence. Open our hearts, Lord, to the people around us. Open our hearts to your word. Let us be able to listen to others. Let us be able to humbly respect others. But most of all, let us show you to others around us. Be with the Dow family, Lord, and the passing of Amanda, and just be with her family and friends and give them comfort. Be with others that are sick, that are tired, that are weary from life, and just give them comfort like only you can. Give us an opportunity, put opportunities in front of us to love on people, to care about people, and to serve you the way we should. It's in your Son, Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you'll go ahead and play the video, we'll get started.
This is your story. This is my story. But most of all, this is the greatest story ever told. This is God's story.
The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram said, "Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." Then the word of the Lord came to him, "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." He took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them." And he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness.
You know you're old when it takes you a couple tries to get over a speed bump. You know you're old when it takes you longer to rest than it did to get tired. When a 30-year-old mortgage sounds like a pretty clever scam. When your best friend is dating someone half their age and isn't breaking any laws. You know you're old when you discover the meaning of life, but then you forgot to write it down. You know you're old when you often repeat things. You often repeat things. You often repeat things. You know age has a way of sneaking up on all of us eventually. It can leave you with that sense that the best of your life is behind you. Maybe it's not age for you, but just that sense that you missed out on your chance at life to fulfill your dreams or to do something really meaningful. Well, if that's how you feel, chapter 2 of the story is going to be really good news for you. There's a noticeable pattern with God in the Bible where he picks the person to help him with his plan to get us back, who in the lower story sees themselves as the least qualified person for the job. In chapter 1 of the story, God unveiled his vision. He simply wanted to come down into the lower story, which he created, and be with us. But the first people, Adam and Eve, didn't embrace that vision, and as a result, were escorted from the garden. A spiritual virus was born in Adam and Eve that creates the option for evil and selfishness in our lives and our relationships with others. This kind of lifestyle has no place in the community of God. We also learned that this spiritual virus, which the Bible simply calls sin, is transmitted to all of Adam's offspring, and that means us. We found in the story of Noah that the plan to get us back into a relationship with God will not come from people, not even from the best of us. So God begins to unveil his plan in chapter 2 to get us back. He's going to create a brand new nation. Why? Through this nation, set apart for his purposes, he will reveal his presence and his power and his plan to get us back. People of all nations who watch this new nation will be able to discover and see what God is up to. So the first order of business is to pick a couple to get this nation started. Now, who would you pick? A young, vibrant, good-looking, healthy, influential couple with a medically proven capacity to crank out lots of children? That's how we think in the lower story. But God thinks differently in the upper story. Later in the story, Isaiah will tell us that his ways are higher than our ways. God selects an old couple named Abram and Sarai. When God first taps him on the shoulder, Abram is 75 and Sarai is 65. They've got their AARP card in hand, discounts at Denny's for the early seating, and collect Social Security checks monthly. In addition to this, in addition to their age, Sarai is barren. She can't have any children. Why does God pick them? He does this so when people see this great nation, they will see not the strength of Abram and Sarai, but their weakness. They will see God as the one above the scenes of their lives, building this amazing nation. They will see his presence. They will see his power and his plan unfolding. At the opening of chapter 2, God invites Abram to go and leave the comforts of his homeland to a place that God would show him. And he promised to not only give them children, but to make them into a great nation. Not only this, but this new nation would one day be a blessing to all people on the earth. Abram likely didn't comprehend this completely, but God was saying to him, I'm going to use you and this nation as my plan to provide a way for all people to come back into the garden. The Bible simply says, so Abram went. In Hebrews chapter 11, we are told, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Now, there's one thing I know about senior citizens. Being the proud possessor of my own AARP card, we don't like change. How many senior citizens does it take to change a light bulb? Change. Who said anything about change? But this older couple dug deep, got way out beyond their comfort zone, and believed in God. This is their only claim to fame. The story doesn't unfold as smoothly as you'd think. The first order of business is to start popping out kids, right? To have a nation, you got to have peoples, at least one. That's logic to us lower story dwellers. Yet 10 years go by and still no children. Abram is now 85 and Sarai 75. So Sarah gets to thinking, maybe God needs our help. That phrase always leads to disaster. She concocts a plan where Abram sleeps with her servant Hagar. Abram, as suspected, puts up no objections. They have a child named Ishmael. God comes to them and says, I will make Ishmael's offspring into a great nation, but this is not my plan. Ishmael is the father of the Arab nation and the foundation of Islam. 13 more years go by and still no child. Abram is now 99 and Sarai 89. God comes to them and changes their names. Abram's name, which ironically means father in Hebrew, is changed to Abraham, which means father of many. Ouch. Sarai's name, which means princess in Hebrew, is changed to Sarah, which means queen. Ouch. Hard names to live up to. Finally, a year later, Sarah has a child who's named Isaac. Isaac means laughter. You'd laugh too if you had a child when you were 100 years old. But the story isn't over. When Isaac is around 15 years old, just about to get his camel's license, God comes to Abraham and asks him to do a crazy, I mean completely crazy thing. Abraham is now 115 and Sarah 105. Optimal years for raising teenagers, wouldn't you say? Here's how it reads. God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. You know, I'm just the average Joe trying to get by in the lower story, but this seems completely insane. But Abraham obeys. We're told in the story, or in Hebrews chapter 11, that Abraham figured that God would raise Isaac from the dead. Now that's faith. As Abraham was bringing the knife down to take the life of his son, an angel, likely Jesus himself, told Abraham to stop, that God has provided a ram whose horns have gotten caught in the thicket. Abraham sacrifices the ram and takes his son home. Whew, that was close. Well, we are told that Isaac gets married to a gal named Rebekah. Now listen to this. They are married 20 years before they have their first child. This nation-building thing is really off to a slow start. But they have twins, Jacob and Esau, and we're told that Jacob has 12 children. Finally, we've got some real momentum. You think you're too old? You think you've missed your chance to do something big, something significant? That's the way we think in the lower story. But if we align our lives to God and what He's up to, some of our best years are still ahead of us. Oh, one more thing you may have noticed. Embedded in this incredible story is a clue of what is to come. In the story, God said to Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Compare this with John chapter 3 and verse 16 of the New Testament. For God so loved the world that He gave His one and only Son. See the parallel? But not only that, do you know where the hill of Moriah is? 2 Chronicles chapter 3 and verse 1 tells us that it is the place that will later become the city of Jerusalem. It is the same hill 2,080 years later that God's one and only Son, Jesus, would be offered up as a sacrifice on a cross.
Wow, there's a lot there. Hope y'all were able to read through the story, chapter 2, this week, and fill out the questions, because there's a lot to discuss in this. It is just a really fabulous story, and a lot of undertones in all of this that we can get something from. So if you have your notebook, go ahead and flip open to the session 2, the personal reflections part. So the first question that we're going to ask is, if you were in Abram's sandals. What would be the biggest challenge of being asked to move to a new land? Now remember where he's at. A lot of pagan gods. His family, his parents did not worship God Almighty. And you've been living there for 75 years. You're 75 years old. Who in here is younger than 75 years old? Raise your hand. Okay. It's about half and half. So those that are older than 75, can you imagine God coming to you right now and saying, take everything you know, go to a land you don't have any clue about, and I'm going to make you a great nation? That's the mentality. I mean, I can't even fathom that at my age, much less at 75. But that's what happens. So, if you were in Abram's sandals, what would be your biggest challenge? Trust in God, okay. Giving up everything that you're comfortable with. Do what? Convincing your wife. Yeah, that could be a challenge. Tom.
I might be all right with moving, but tell me where I'm going
Yeah,
so I can make a plan.
yeah.
But he didn't even tell him that. He said, you're going to go and go.
Just go and trust me. I mean, look at the logistics here. He's 75 years old. He has a wife. He has many, 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 many servants. He has a lot of possessions. He's very wealthy. And in that time, that meant herds of various kinds. That meant servants. That meant a lot of things. This isn't me packing up my house, calling up U-Haul and throwing what I have in there and going to another place and unloading. This is tents, animals, food, everything you can possibly imagine, the difficulty of putting all of that travel together, walking away, knowing you're not coming back, and trusting that you're going to be taken care of. Yeah. This was a big, big deal. Big deal. So a lot of things happened. Who did he bring with him? What family member that it mentioned other than Sarai that he brought with him? Lot. What's your thinking on that? Did y'all think about that at all? Did y'all think that was strange? Did you think it was interesting? You think it was Lot's decision more than Abraham's, okay? Uh-huh.
We have to consider or think about, why did God choose Abraham? He could have picked anybody, but he picked Abraham. And I believe the reason that he picked Abraham was because he knew this man's heart. The Lord has always wanted our heart. And I think he was a man, because the psalmist says in
And I think that's what I wanted to kind of get to, because that's later on in the questions, it's what stood out to you individually in all of this. And when I was looking at that, and I started thinking through when he took Isaac to go. So Isaac's around 15, takes him to, 16, takes him to go. A 16-year-old kid versus a 115-year-old man, who's going to win if somebody needs to run and get away? The 16-year-old. But he doesn't do that. That's why I asked the Lot question too. What was Abraham's character that his nephew and his son are willing to follow this man? They didn't get spoken to by God, but they were willing to follow this man wherever he went. I don't think when God said, I attribute this, this is your righteousness, I don't think that's a one-time thing. This was a lifetime of following God and showing his love and trust of God. And it influenced his nephew, it influenced his son, it had to influence everybody around him because of who he looked to, always. And I love that part of it. So, Sarah got impatient. We all do. But here we are 10 years after God made a promise that they're going to have many, many descendants. She has her own plan, right? Abram's supposed to sleep with Hagar. They're going to have a child, and that child is going to be the inheritance. Was that reality? Is that what happened? No. But if we look at that story as a whole, you have Hagar and you have Ishmael, who was 14 when Isaac was born. So he's a teenager. So what's your thought? What did you learn of the way that God took care of Hagar and Ishmael in this story? It's always been a fascination to me. This is not the child that God wanted to build a nation on. So what do you think of what God did with Hagar and Ishmael and the promise he gave to Hagar? We do.
But because it was his son still, he kept his promise, and after him became kings and nations.
What nation did they become? Arab nation. The people that today hate the Jews and hate Christians more than anyone. Is that not ironic? And then the fights over in that country for land. Did God not make a promise that they would live as far as he could see?
Think about a son and knowing that his dad ran him and his mother off. He's not going to love his brother.
And God specifically said that Ishmael and his descendants will always cause fights. He will never get along with his brothers, ever. I mean, that's an interesting topic that we never discuss. Why did God do that? Why did God... Anybody have an answer? Because I don't.
From the beginning, it was not God's plan, it was Sarah's plan. She caused that concubine, go in, go take her and have a child. So that wasn't God's.
No. It wasn't God's plan, but he still allowed it. Why did he allow it?
Well, just like he allows our sin. He allows us to do things that we shouldn't do. So, and there's
But there is a lesson here. The lesson I got from it, and this may be wrong, in my opinion, the reason that he agreed to make Ishmael a nation is because he made a promise to Abraham, flat out. Your descendants will be a great nation. Ishmael is his descendant. In my opinion, in part, God's simply honoring his commitment that he made. Could be as simple as that. But it's the sin that we made that caused the issue. It's the sin that happened that caused the issue. God didn't intentionally force two groups to hate each other. Let's get that straight. But he honored his commitment, and because Sarah, in this case, was in a hurry, caused all the issues. No different than Adam and Eve. But God honors his commitments.
God could have abandoned Hagar and Ishmael, but he didn't.
Correct. He had made a promise, and he's going to keep it. So what is the most difficult thing for you to understand about the story of Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac?
It's unlike God to ask for a human sacrifice.
It is unlike God to ask for human sacrifice. He never asked why, okay? He was willing to do it. It is powerful.
a lesson for us. A lesson for us brought down through the ages of this plan that God had of salvation. And we just look back and see all the scriptures are written for our learning and our
Yeah.
Yes, the question is why? Is it difficult for us to understand it, or what's difficult in that? Why? Why? It keeps going through my head. Why did he ask for that to be done?
Yeah.
Abraham did everything he was asked to do. He proved himself faithful over and over. His righteousness was viewed as a great thing. And now you ask him to do this? Was it a test to see if he would do it? Is it, why? I mean, it keeps going through my mind. I can't grasp. What's the test? What's the purpose?
Who else was affected by this? Who else had the promise that was affected by this particular story? Who would be affected the most by this? Isaac. Can you imagine your dad strapping you to an altar with a knife about to plunge into your heart? Knowing that God had told your dad that you would become a great nation, and there was a promise there, and you're laying there wondering, wait a minute. I mean, maybe this is the only point.
It was not by chance there was a lamb,
Right, a ram.
in the brush.
Yeah,
This all points to the perfect sacrifice lamb of God.
yeah. But how much more is Isaac's faith? How much more is Isaac's righteousness bolstered by the way that God showed his power in all of this?
Created more trust, I'm sure,
Mm-hmm.
in what God
So let's move on to, yeah.
15 or 16 years old and his commitment to what his father asked him to do. Wonder what part Abram and Sarah's story had his
Right.
I find it interesting to think that you can find a 15-year-old today that's to do that.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe it would be God sent or what.
yeah.
Just think that's interesting. Think about him at 15 years old. Talk about Abraham raising his children to be a believer, a committed son to his father, to his mother. Think about what his mother must have thought about this. This is beyond the story, but it says something about his character.
Yeah. Well, going beyond the story a little more, when the video was playing, what I was thinking about was when God changed their names to Father of Many and Queen, and they start calling each other that in public. I mean, can you imagine the ridicule, the jokes that could have been made about that, being as old as they were? I mean, that had to go over into Isaac's life, the way other people viewed his parents. I wonder what changed when they actually had kids, and Isaac came along. I wonder if the community looked at them differently as, whoa. I bet they did, because that's God's plan. I mean, God used throughout this story and many, many, many more in the Bible. He didn't use the normal, everyday person per se of what you would think he would use. He used very different people. And we're, Jacob and Esau. What did Jacob do to Esau? He cheated him. He cheated him out of his inheritance. He was known as a mischief, swindling, conniving kid. his brother went out and worked hard hunting and bringing in food and everything. Jacob was a mother's boy. He was a mama's boy. That's what it says. Jacob was a mama's boy, and his mom convinced him to steal the inheritance. This is who God used to make his nation. So anybody out here that's like, well, I'm not worthy, I'm not whatever to do God's service, wrong. He can and will use you, no matter what your circumstance, no matter what your history, no matter what is going on in your life. If you turn to him and trust him, he will use you. Period. Plain and simple. How would you describe Jacob? I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but what do you see in the story that would make you like Jacob, not like Jacob, wonder about his character? Talk about Jacob some. Yes, a bowl of stew. Yeah. Yeah. So true. And maybe that's why Esau wasn't quite so angry when Jacob came back. Yeah, he had some time to think about it. Grew up a little bit. Yeah. I like that. Uh-huh.
I think the reason Abraham did what he did for God is because God knew that he would, and God did the same thing for us when he allowed Jesus to come to the cross. Did the very same thing. So I think we can learn from that. Remember Ephesians 5:1 said, "Be imitators of God." So we can be like God. Although sometimes, and we know we're created in the image of God. And I think sometimes we think, no one can be like God. But we really can. And we see God-like people and Christ-like people quite often.
Quite often.
So we can, and I think that's one of the things that I admired about that story about Abraham. He was actually being like God, to be able to offer his only son. That's what God did for us.
Yep. So there's an interesting story in here about Jacob and when he wrestled with the man. What's your take on that story? And if you didn't read this and don't remember the story, when Jacob is heading back to see his brother, and he's sending gifts in front of him, a herd of camels, a herd of sheep, whatever the case may be. And he's telling his servants to say certain things when he sees Esau, when they see Esau, to hopefully get in good favor with Esau. And when they get closer, Jacob has stayed behind. He separates his servants, his first wife, and then his second wife, and then he's left alone one night. and he wrestles with a man all night. And who was that man? It was the Lord. So he wrestled with the Lord all night and never gave up. That's the crazy thing about that story to me. He's wrestling with God Almighty all night and never gave up in his fight. What do you think of when you hear that story? I mean, what I thought of was, Jacob is one stubborn dude. He has got some grit. He has got some fight in him. He's been doing things his way all his life. And he's fighting. What it made me think of, and this may be a very different, is we all have fights in our life. Our personalities that we all have lend ourselves to fights about various things. What you're passionate about, what you argue with, the struggle that you have with God. It's long lasting. The struggles that we have in our life aren't just we have a quick fight and we move on. Some of these fights, some of these arguments that we have in our head and in our lives and that we struggle with are ongoing and will be there all our life. It's a continuous struggle. God didn't get tired of the fight that Jacob had with him. God does not get tired of the arguments and the struggles that you have with him. He's still there with you. You can fight with him all you want. Just know he's there. Just know you're fighting with God there. He's there with you. He can comfort you. He can always be there for you. So I'll just leave it on with that. Thank you all very much.